Good Night, My Baby, where true-to-life family drama meets quiet revelations. If stories about love, loyalty, and boundaries resonate with you, consider subscribing. It helps more people find these heartfelt narratives, and it tells us to keep making them. Today's story is titled, "My sister announced she's pregnant for the 5th time, but I'm tired of raising her kids, so My name is Alyssa Dunn, and the first sound that claims my mornings is an alarm clock that doesn't belong to me. It's the same plastic clock that chirps at 5:30 a.m., a little off-pitch, a little stubborn, like the house we live in and the people inside it. I used to wake to the whir of mixers and the warm breath of ovens, my own bakery, a storefront with windows big enough to swallow sunrise. I'd pull cinnamon through dough and watch it swell like hope does when you give it heat and time. But sometimes, even the softest bread goes flat. Mine did. A lease too high, foot traffic too thin, a winter too long. The bank did the math. The rest is a cardboard box history. When the bakery folded, I folded into my sister's home 2 towns away. Just for a while, we said, those 3 words we toss like a life preserver and later realize it was an anchor. My sister, Cheryl, had 4 children. Logan at 15, eyes too old for his age. Ellie at 12, polite until she isn't. Hunter at 9, all questions, no breaks. And Nora at 6, a sunbeam with asthma. The house carries the scent of laundry soap and panic. Mornings there unfold like a drill. Breakfast, backpacks, inhalers, signed forms, laughter that ricochets, fights that fizz, and the signal whistle of a kettle insisting there's still time for coffee. There's never time for coffee. This is what I have learned about the American morning in a house that's always one step behind. You become a conductor for a train that's already moving. You split pastries in halves to arbitrate fairness. You mop orange juice while fielding spelling words. You tie shoelaces while predicting tears. You drive a car full of music you did not choose and arguments you did not start. Love, in this house, is logistics. It's the to-do list written in blue pen on the fridge, a liturgy of milk, bus routes, and field trip money. Love, too, is sometimes silent, because to speak would crack you open. If I sound tired, it's because I am. But fatigue is not the entirety of me. There is a tender, stubborn part still standing inside. The girl with ink-stained hands who drew logos on napkins in the bakery's slow hours, who believed in shapes and colors as a way to tell the world, "Here I am." When the house settles into its daytime emptiness, I carry that girl with me to a coffee shop down the road, where I earn $15 an hour and a collection of stories whispered through drive-through windows. I learn how people order hope. Make it quick, extra shot, less sweet. I pour their small mercies with foam hearts that get swallowed in 3 minutes. At night, after the kids are fed and the dishes are stacked in a rack like city skylines, I watch tutorials for graphic design on a laptop that wheezes like a harmonica. The cursor blinks at me. Do you still believe? Some nights I do. Some nights I fall asleep with the screen at mid-lesson, waking to a drained battery and a quiet confession. You are building everyone else's life and leaving yours in draft. People talk about family as if it were a quilt, warm, purposeful, pieced together by hands that understood how colors can stand side by side without clashing. But anyone who's ever tried to stitch a life knows there are snags. There's a word for the particular snag I live in. A therapist on a podcast called it parentification, when a child or a sibling wears a role they weren't fitted for. The word fell into me like a marble down a drain. It explained the ache I felt in my back even when I didn't lift anything, and why relief tasted like guilt. I am not their mother. I am their bridge. And bridges break when the wrong kind of weight crosses them too long. Most days, the kids make it easy to forget my own edges. Logan sits shotgun and pretends not to care, but he watches whether my hands shake on the steering wheel. He knows more than I say. Ellie leans into me when math won't behave, sighing in a way that says, "Stay until this makes sense." Hunter invents games in checkout lines and tells the cashier a fact about dinosaurs that might be wrong but is delivered with such conviction it almost becomes right. And little Nora, sweet Nora, wraps herself around my leg and asks for braids that won't pull too tight. She talks to me as if every minute we get is something she's borrowing with a promise to return. At my sister's, gratitude wears a thin coat. Cheryl leaves early for night shifts at the supermarket, comes home with sleep tangled in her hair, and mumbles thanks between yawns that swallow our conversations. Her boyfriend, Blake, works nights too. He drifts through our mornings like an apology he has no time to make. They're not cruel, not exactly. They're just tired in a way that announces itself as absence. I hold no court over their choices, only the debris left in my palms when their choices blow through. Tara, my best friend and the one person who has always called me by my name as if it were a shelter, answers the phone when I pace in the kitchen after bedtime. "You're drowning," she says, not unkindly. "That house is the ocean, and you don't have a boat. You have a ladle." I laugh because she's right, and because you must laugh when the truth draws blood. She is building her own design gigs from a studio apartment across town. When I describe the homework charts and the doctor runs, she pauses and says, "You're good, Lies, but good people deserve oxygen." There's a moment most nights right before midnight when the whole block exhales. The porch light across the street dies and the cricket chorus gets brave. This is when I take out my sketchbook. I draw circles becoming letters, letters becoming names. None of them are mine, not yet. I imagine a small studio with plants I remember to water, a desk that doesn't wobble, a calendar that belongs only to me. I tell myself that starting over is not the same as giving up. Starting over is remembering what you promised yourself when you were 13 and someone asked, "Who do you want to be?" And you didn't laugh. But plans are delicate things. They bruise when shoved. They scatter when someone throws a new stone into the pond and ripples rewrite the surface. I didn't know it yet, but a stone was on its way. A sentence about to land in the living room and rearrange the furniture of our days. On the afternoon that would change everything, I was folding t-shirts into approximations of calm. The TV murmured a news segment about rent climbing faster than anyone's pay. Ellie's dance shoes lay in a modest heap near the doorway. Logan's soccer cleats made the hallway smell like a storm had walked through. There was pasta boiling, and Hunter's voice was reciting something that sounded like a science report, but may have been a manifesto about why bedtime is unconstitutional. I was measuring out Nora's inhaler dosage when the front door opened and Cheryl came in with Blake behind her, a pizza box perched like a trophy. Cheryl's face was bright in a way I hadn't seen in a while, like a light had found a switch. "We've got news," she said, a drum roll in her voice. I wiped my hands on a dish towel. The house leaned in. She smiled. "I'm pregnant." The word hung in the air, round and undeniable. 5th. That's the number my brain offered me, unasked. The kids shifted. Logan's jaw tilted. Ellie's shoulders pulled in. Hunter whispered again. Nora blinked as if the room had gone brighter. I stood there, feeling the old bakery in the corners of me. The part that once believed a little more flour would solve everything, go very, very quiet. "Congrats!" I said, because that's what we say when life offers itself, even when we're not sure it has found the right address. Cheryl talked about due dates and cravings. Blake cracked a joke that didn't land, and I found myself watching the pot of pasta boil over, a starchy foam cresting like an omen. I turned off the stove, lifted the pot, set it down too hard. The lid clattered and someone laughed, and for a second I could see the chapter heading right itself across the ceiling. The part where Alyssa stops pretending this is sustainable. I wish I could tell you I decided everything right then, that some brave, cinematic version of me placed the pot on the counter and announced my future with a voice that didn't shake. But I am not a movie, and my courage arrives like morning light, slow, a shade at a time. What I did do was step into the hallway and lean my forehead against cool paint. I let the house speak, footsteps, whispers, the pizza box opening, and I listened to my heart knocking like it had been waiting too long on the wrong side of a door. You make a life, and then sometimes it makes you smaller. But there is another way. You make a life that makes you whole. That night, as the kids tugged slices from the cardboard and Cheryl's laughter looped through the kitchen, I made the smallest of vows. I would not vanish, not even for love, especially not for love. Outside, somewhere beyond the streetlights and the mailboxes, a future turned in its sleep, restless, certain it would wake me soon. The dawn began again before I was ready for it. The alarm shrilled at 5:30 a.m., and in that first bleary moment between sleep and duty, I almost believed I was back in my bakery. But then came the sound of feet on linoleum, a cupboard door slamming, and Nora's small voice squeaking, "Auntie, can you braid my hair?" Reality returned like a bucket of cold water. Mornings in Cheryl's house are not gentle, they are a symphony tuned to chaos. Logan, already 15 and full of sharpened edges, argued with Ellie over who had eaten the last Pop-Tart. Their voices clashed like cymbals in a marching band. "You ate mine yesterday," Ellie snapped, her thin fingers slamming the cupboard door. Logan rolled his eyes, tossing back sarcasm like pennies into a fountain. Meanwhile, Hunter, 9 years old, heart full of storms, knocked over his orange juice, sending it spilling across the counter in a citrus flood. And then came Nora, my little shadow, wrapping her arms around my legs, demanding braids before school. I split the last pastry in half, mopped up juice with one hand, held Nora's hair with the other. Some mornings I wondered if I had grown 4 extra limbs just to survive. By the time I managed a sip of cold coffee, the car was loaded with kids and complaints. Logan cranked the radio, blasting a song whose lyrics I couldn't follow. Ellie whined about math homework, Hunter peppered me with questions about dinosaurs, and Nora sang, off-key, but with conviction. The car became a moving carnival, every seat its own attraction. When I finally dropped them off at school, I sat for a moment in the empty car, hands trembling on the steering wheel. My head throbbed with the kind of ache that only comes from too much noise and too little gratitude. Then I drove to my coffee shop shift, where 6 hours of steaming milk and taking orders awaited me. At the shop, exhaustion wore a uniform, slumped shoulders, tight lips, eyes glued to phones. Customers rarely looked at me. They looked at what I placed in their hands. "Can you make it quick?" barked a man in a suit, tapping his watch as if my $15 an hour hands could bend time itself. I forced a smile, one of those service industry smiles that feels like taping over a crack in a dam. The register hummed, the milk frothed, and every tip jar coin sounded like a reminder that dreams are expensive. $15 an hour, barely enough to cover my phone bill and gas, enough to keep me moving, never enough to rest. I wore the weight of that number like an invisible backpack, every coin inside another reminder of how far I had drifted from the bakery I once owned, the dream I still cradled like a sleeping child. After work, the cycle began again, back to the school to gather the kids, then home to face homework battles and dinner negotiations. That night, spaghetti boiled while Logan groaned about soccer practice. Ellie refused to touch anything green. Hunter whined about whose turn it was to feed the dog, and Nora clung to my hip until I bent down to kiss her forehead. Cheryl was gone again, off to her supermarket night shift. Blake, too. Sometimes they were shadows crossing the threshold for mere minutes, long enough to drop their keys, mumble a thanks, and collapse into sleep. Nights became the only window that belonged to me. After tucking Nora into bed, checking Ellie's algebra, and reminding Logan that sarcasm wasn't a language, I pulled out my laptop. Graphic design tutorials blinked back at me, layers, vectors, gradients. I wanted to be there to sink into the craft, to shape something that was mine. But exhaustion arrived earlier than inspiration. My eyes burned, my hand sagged, my head dipped. Too often I fell asleep mid-lesson, waking to a dead battery and the sour taste of another lost hour. It was Ellie who noticed first. One night she tiptoed into my room, eyes wide, her voice soft. "Why do you look so tired?" she asked. I forced a smile, brushing hair from her face. "Just trying to keep up." She hugged me, her thin arms warm around my neck. For a second I felt needed. Then the thought slipped in like a thief. Needed for what? To be the mother they already had but rarely saw. To sacrifice my 20s to laundry and late-night algebra. The truth gnawed at me silently. I was not their mother. I was their bridge. And bridges are not meant to hold forever. By now my savings, $3,000 left from the bakery, were bleeding away into doctor visits, soccer fees, school supplies, inhalers. Cheryl contributed to rent and groceries, but money slipped through her fingers like sand. Blake offered nothing. He was a fixture, not a provider. Cheryl would sometimes pat my shoulder and say, "You're so good with them," as though it were praise. But to me, it was a chain. One evening, while the kids sprawled on the couch watching TV, I stepped into the kitchen and called Tara. My voice cracked. "I'm drowning." Tara, who had never learned to sugarcoat, replied without hesitation. "You're not their mom, Lies. You can't keep putting your dreams on hold." Her words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. I stared at the laptop on the counter, the half-finished logo project waiting like a patient that would never be healed. My professors had sent emails about missed deadlines. My dream of a design studio, the studio I had pictured since I was a girl with crayons, was slipping further away. The kids were not the problem. I loved their quirks. Logan's sarcastic jokes, Ellie's shy smiles, Hunter's boundless curiosity, Nora's sticky hugs. They were family, but I wasn't their parent. Cheryl was, and Cheryl was barely present, content to let me carry the load. I began to calculate. 10 hours a day on the kids, 6 at work, 3 on classes. That left 5 for sleep if I was lucky. My future was shrinking, my reflection dimming. I wasn't just tired, I was disappearing. Every day spent raising Cheryl's children was a day stolen from my own life. I knew something had to change. And yet I also knew change wouldn't come quietly. It never does. It arrives like a storm, uninvited, loud, and impossible to ignore. And sure enough, the storm was already forming on the horizon. Some storms announce themselves with thunder. Mine arrived in the form of Cheryl's grin. I was folding laundry in the living room, tiny socks, faded t-shirts, Logan's hoodie that smelled faintly of grass, when the front door banged open. Cheryl swept in with Blake behind her, smug as ever, balancing a pizza box like he had just won a prize. Her face glowed, brighter than I'd seen in months. She dropped the laundry basket from my hands and pulled me toward the couch as if she couldn't keep the words in. "We've got news," she said, her voice ringing with a kind of joy that felt foreign in our tired house. Blake plopped the pizza down, stretched out like a man who owned the place, and nodded at me with the smirk I had learned to distrust. Then Cheryl said it. "I'm pregnant, 5th kid. Can you believe it?" The room paused. Even the children froze in a rare silence. Logan's eyes flicked to mine, sharp, wary. Ellie shifted in her seat, chewing the corner of her sleeve. Hunter whispered again, as though it were an incantation, and Nora blinked at her mother like the word pregnant was a kind of magic she didn't yet understand. My jaw tightened. I forced a smile, murmured, "Wow, congrats. but inside my stomach twisted into knots. I had given 3 years of my 20s to Cheryl's household, 3 years of lost savings, delayed dreams, sleepless nights. Now there would be another baby, another mouth, another weight pressed squarely onto my shoulders. That evening, we ate pizza while Cheryl beamed and Blake leaned back like a king in his castle. The cheese stuck in my throat. Something in me cracked open, not anger exactly, but recognition. I was playing a part in someone else's play and the script was choking me. Later, as plates clattered into the sink, Cheryl leaned forward across the table, her smile fading into seriousness. "We've been talking," she began. Blake folded his arms, that smug grin hovering like a shadow. "You're so good with the kids, Alyssa. We need you to step up more. Maybe quit the coffee shop, focus on them full time." The words rang in my ears, louder than the kids squabbling in the background. Quit my job. I repeated it as if the phrase itself might make sense if I tasted it out loud. "Yes," Blake added casually, "we're swamped at the supermarket. With the baby coming, we can't handle everything." Cheryl nodded, eyes bright but sharp. "Plus, we're tight on cash. You could chip in $300 a month for rent. It's only fair you're living here." $300. My pulse quickened. I was barely scraping by already, pouring what little I earned into their children's needs. Now they wanted rent, and to quit the one job that gave me a shred of independence. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I'm already doing everything, school runs, meals, homework. I can't quit my job." Cheryl's face hardened. "You're here eating our food, using our space. You owe us." Blake shrugged. "It's just temporary. We'll figure it out after the baby." His casual tone lit a fire in me. Temporary? I'd been their crutch for 3 years. I pushed my plate away, stood up. "I need to think about this," I said, my voice shaking with both fury and fear. And then I walked to my room before the anger boiled over into something I couldn't take back. That night I called Tara. My words tumbled out like broken glass. "They want me to quit my job, pay rent. They act like I'm their maid." Tara didn't hesitate. "They're using you, Lies. They've been using you. You are not their employee. You're not their mother. What about your design classes? Your future?" I stared at my laptop, where an unfinished logo project glowed dimly on the screen. Weeks of missed deadlines. Emails from professors unanswered. I'd been so consumed with keeping Cheryl's family afloat that I had let my own dreams rot in the corner. The kids weren't the problem. I loved them. Their chaos, their quirks, their laughter. They were the only reason I had endured so long. But Cheryl and Blake, they weren't asking me for help. They were demanding my life. The realization hit me with the force of a verdict. I could not keep sacrificing myself. Not for Cheryl, not for Blake, not even for the illusion of family harmony. That night, after the kids fell asleep, I sat at my desk, sketchbook open. My hands trembled as I drew, not logos this time, but a single word, written over and over. Freedom. Morning arrived like a thief. I woke not to rest, but to exhaustion disguised as routine. The alarm screeched, the children erupted into their usual chaos, and I moved through it all as if in a trance. Yet under my skin, something had shifted since Cheryl's announcement. The air felt heavier, my patience thinner, every demand a reminder that my own life was leaking away. Logan was already bickering with Ellie about whose turn it was to empty the dishwasher. Hunter dragged his science project into the kitchen, spilling glitter across the floor, while Nora clung to my hip whispering, "Braid my hair, Auntie, please." I moved like a machine, splitting waffles, cleaning juice spills, tying shoelaces, braiding hair, signing permission slips. My reflection in the microwave looked hollow, eyes dulled, cheeks pale. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Driving the kids to school, I caught my breath in the brief silence after they slammed the car doors. The radio hummed low, but in my chest, a storm raged. I loved them, God, I loved them, but love was not supposed to erase you. That afternoon, after a 6-hour shift at the coffee shop, my phone buzzed with a text from Tara. "You need to think seriously, Lies. This isn't living, it's survival." Her words pierced me because they echoed what I had begun to admit. I wasn't building a future, I was patching a sinking ship that wasn't even mine. That evening, Cheryl cornered me in the kitchen. Her eyes narrowed, her voice sharp. "You're not pulling your weight, Alyssa. I asked you to step up and you're still wasting time at that coffee shop." The word wasting hit me like a slap. My voice shook, but I found my edge. "I cook, I clean, I drive the kids every day. I'm already keeping this house standing." Cheryl laughed bitterly. "That's not enough. With the baby coming, we need you here, not chasing some hobby degree." Her words lodged in my chest like broken glass. Hobby, as if my dream of becoming a designer was a child's game. "My classes aren't a hobby," I said, rising to my feet. The chair scraped the tile, sharp and final. "They're my future." She stepped closer, her face inches from mine. "Future? You're living in my house, eating my food. You think you're too good for us now." I froze. Ellie stood in the doorway, eyes wide, her small body stiff with fear. I couldn't unleash the fury boiling inside, not with her watching, so I took a breath that tasted like surrender but felt like survival. "I'm not your servant, Cheryl. I've given you 3 years of my life." Her lips curled. "If you're not all in, maybe you shouldn't be here at all." The words sliced deep. Not a suggestion, an ultimatum, maybe even a threat. For the first time, I saw it clearly. She wasn't just leaning on me. She was willing to break me to keep her life comfortable. That night, my hands trembled as I called Tara. My voice was low, urgent. "She thinks I owe her my entire life." Tara's voice was calm but unyielding. "Lies, you need boundaries. You're not her maid. You're not her mom. You deserve your own space." Boundaries. The word echoed like a bell. I had never learned them, not in this family, not in this house, but maybe it was time. Later, I opened my laptop and began scrolling through apartment listings in Madison. Studios, 1-bedrooms, places with leaky sinks and peeling paint, but they were mine. My stomach clenched at the prices, $1,500 a month plus deposits, but fear and excitement tangled together in my chest. For the first time in years, possibility flickered. That night while the kids slept, I sat at my desk sketching. Not logos, not assignments. I drew a simple box, 4 walls, 1 door. I shaded it lightly, added a small desk, a plant in the corner. My hand steadied as the image took shape. It was nothing more than a drawing. But in that sketch, I saw myself again. Not a shadow in Cheryl's house, not a stand-in mother, not a ghost of a failed bakery. Just Alyssa. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough to begin. When you begin to imagine freedom, even in secret sketches, the world around you sharpens. The same walls that once felt like protection start to feel like a cage. The sounds of the house, Ellie's laughter, Hunter's questions, Logan's sarcasm, Nora's humming, were still sweet, but now they came wrapped in a layer of ache. I could no longer hear them without also hearing my own silence, the silence of the life I wasn't living. Over the next week, Cheryl and Blake pushed harder. Cheryl would leave lists of chores on the counter. Grocery runs, doctor's appointments, laundry. "Think of the kids," she'd say. Her tone dipped in sugar but edged with expectation. Blake, meanwhile, made himself comfortable in the role of overseer. One night, while Cheryl napped on the couch, he leaned against the kitchen doorway and said, "You know, you should sell that bakery equipment you're keeping in storage. Could help with expenses." His words made my blood boil. That old mixer, those pans, I had kept them like relics of a faith I still wanted to practice. Selling them would be like selling off the bones of my own dream. I swallowed the anger and nodded, but inside I was screaming. They weren't asking for help. They were demanding my life as payment for existing in theirs. The kids, though, they weren't blind. Logan lingered near me one night while I packed my laptop after a late study session. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer than his usual armor of sarcasm. I wanted to lie, but I didn't. I'm trying to be, I said. He nodded, and in that nod I saw his quiet knowing. Children often see more than we admit. The weight of choice pressed harder each day. I couldn't keep sacrificing my future, but leaving meant hurting them. Every time Nora begged me to braid her hair or Ellie asked for homework help, I felt torn in two. But I also knew this truth. Staying was not love, it was surrender. One afternoon when the kids were at school, I called Tara again. My voice shook as I told her about the rent, the demands, the way Cheryl called my design classes a hobby. Lies, Tara said, her tone steady and fierce. They are using you. Boundaries aren't selfish. They're survival. You deserve your own life. The kids need their mother, not you. You can still love them without disappearing. Her words struck deep. That night while folding laundry, I made a decision. I pulled out my laptop, scrolled through listings again, and this time I didn't just browse. I began saving addresses, calculating budgets. My savings, $3,000 left, could cover a deposit and the first month's rent. My coffee shop job wouldn't stretch far, but maybe enough if I skipped extras, cut corners, picked up more shifts. I told myself this wasn't abandonment. It was an act of faith. A faith that the kids would see in time that loving someone doesn't always mean staying under the same roof. Sometimes it means showing them what it looks like to stand up, to claim your life back before it disappears. That night, after tucking Nora in, I sat at my desk. My sketchbook lay open, and for the first time in months, my hand moved with purpose. Not stick figures for a child, but bold, confident lines. Shapes that hinted at a logo, something professional, something alive. As the design emerged under my pen, I felt my chest loosen. This wasn't just art, it was proof. Proof that the part of me that dreamed, created, and reached for more wasn't dead. It had only been waiting. Waiting for me to say, enough. And I had finally said it. The moment I whispered enough to myself, the air inside the house seemed to shift. Maybe no one else noticed, but I felt it. A faint electricity, the way the sky feels right before rain. My mind had crossed a threshold, and even if my body was still inside Cheryl's house, my spirit had started walking toward the door. It didn't take long for the storm to break. One evening, while I helped Ellie diagram sentences at the kitchen table, Cheryl marched in. Her face was tight, her arms crossed like she was holding her whole argument inside her chest. Blake trailed behind her, leaning against the door frame as if he'd been invited to a show. "We need to talk," Cheryl snapped, her voice slicing through the quiet. I closed Ellie's workbook gently, my stomach already twisting. "What's up?" I asked, though I knew. "You're not pulling your weight, Alyssa," she said, her voice sharp with accusation. "I asked you to step up, and you're still wasting time at that coffee shop. It's irresponsible." The word irresponsible made my breath catch. I stared at her, feeling heat rush up my neck. "I'm doing everything I can," I shot back, my voice trembling but firm. "I cook, I clean, I drive the kids every day. I keep this house running." She rolled her eyes, dismissing years of sacrifice with a flick of disdain. "That's not enough. With the baby coming, we need you here, not chasing some hobby degree." Her words hit like a slap. Hobby. She had reduced the one fragile piece of my future to a pastime, like knitting or crosswords. I stood, my chair scraping against the tile. "My design classes aren't a hobby," I said, my voice low but sharp. "They're my future." Cheryl laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "Future? You're living in my house, eating my food. You think you're too good for us now." Her words landed heavy, but I noticed Ellie. She was standing in the doorway, her wide eyes darting between us, her face pale with fear. My rage threatened to spill, but seeing Ellie stopped me. I swallowed hard, forcing control. "I'm not your servant, Cheryl," I said evenly. "I've given you 3 years of my life." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "If you're not all in, maybe you shouldn't be here at all." The silence that followed was unbearable. Blake smirked from the corner, satisfied with the drama. Ellie's lip trembled, though she tried to hide it. And me, I felt a strange calm slide over my fury, the way clarity sometimes comes not in light but in shadow. That night, after the kids went to bed, I paced the backyard with my phone pressed to my ear. Tara answered on the second ring. She called me irresponsible, I said, my voice tight. She thinks I owe her my entire life. Tara's reply was calm but sharp, like a blade honed for truth. Alyssa, you need to set boundaries. You're not her employee. You're not her mom. You deserve your own space, your own goals. I pressed my forehead against the cool siding of the house, tears burning my eyes. But the kids, they need their mom, Tara interrupted gently. Not you sacrificing everything. If you stay, you're teaching them that love means erasing yourself. That's not the lesson they need. Her words sliced deep, but they were right. Staying wasn't saving the kids. It was modeling despair. That night, back in my room, I opened my laptop and began scrolling through apartments again. Studios downtown. Tiny, cramped places with peeling paint. Rent that made my stomach drop. $1,500 a month plus deposit. My $3,000 in savings could get me in the door, but survival after that would be tight. Still, for the first time, the listings didn't feel like fantasies. They felt like maps, and I was ready to follow one. I closed the laptop and sat quietly in the dark. For the first time in years, my chest rose with something other than duty. It rose with resolve. The decision to leave is never just a single act. It's 1,000 tiny rehearsals before the final curtain. I began mine quietly, in stolen moments when Cheryl wasn't looking. In the mornings, after the kids rushed out the door, I'd linger by my phone, scrolling through apartment listings as though I were peeking into other lives. Some were small, cracked-walled studios, others one-bedrooms above noisy bars. None were perfect, but all of them had one thing in common: they weren't here. I ran numbers obsessively, like equations that might solve my future. Rent, $1,500. Utilities, another $200. Food, transport, classes. I scribbled it all into a notebook late at night. My coffee shop paycheck barely stretched across the columns, but if I cut corners, if I gave up on little luxuries I hadn't seen in years anyway, new clothes, dinners out, it might just work. Survival, not comfort, but survival on my own terms. Logan caught me one evening hunched over those calculations. His eyes flicked to the notebook, then back to me. "You're moving out, aren't you?" he asked, voice quiet but certain. I froze, pen still in hand. "I'm thinking about it." "Because of Mom," he said flatly. I nodded, unable to hide it from him. Logan was too old to pretend around. "I need to live my life too, but I'll still be here for you guys, just differently." He didn't answer, just picked at the frayed edge of his hoodie. But I saw the way his jaw tightened, the way he carried too much for 15. I began preparing him in ways small and secret, teaching him how to make a grocery list, how to cook simple meals, how to check Nora's inhaler. "You're smart, Logan. You can do this," I told him, guiding his hands as he measured detergent into the washing machine. He rolled his eyes, muttered about how Mom never does this, but I saw him paying attention. Beneath his sarcasm was something steadier, a will to step up. Ellie was different. She cornered me one night in the hallway, twisting her hair nervously. "Are you leaving because we're too much?" she whispered. The question hit me like a blade. I knelt, pulling her close. "No, Ellie, not because of you, never because of you. I just need my own space." Her arms tightened around my neck, her tears warm on my shoulder. I held her until she slept, my own heart breaking at the thought that she'd blame herself. Hunter and Nora were younger, harder to explain to. At breakfast, I tried. "I might live somewhere else soon," I said gently. Hunter frowned into his cereal. "Who's going to help me with my science project?" he asked. Nora's lip trembled. "Will you still braid my hair?" I smiled, though my throat burned. "Yes, I'll still help, I'll still braid, I'll just live in another place." Their confused eyes lingered with me all day. Meanwhile, Cheryl noticed the shift in me. One morning, she caught me checking listings on my phone. "You're acting weird," she said, suspicion dripping from her voice. I'm just planning, I replied flatly, not looking up. Planning to bail on us? Typical, she scoffed, turning away. Her words stung, but I didn't bite back. I was done fighting on her terms. That week, I visited my first apartment in Madison, a tiny studio with a kitchenette and one window. The landlord's voice droned numbers, $1,500 a month plus a deposit. I nodded, fingers tightening around my phone where I'd saved screenshots of other listings. It wasn't much, but standing in that bare little room, I could breathe. I could see myself again. Back at Cheryl's, I kept quiet, moving through the days like a ghost with a secret. I still packed lunches, still checked homework, still braided hair. But inside, a countdown had started. And for the first time in years, the ticking clock didn't fill me with dread. It filled me with hope. By the end of that week, the secret inside me felt almost too heavy to hold. Every chore, every errand, every carpool was colored by the knowledge that I was rehearsing my exit. I folded laundry with trembling fingers, drove the kids to school with a lump in my throat, and lay awake at night mapping out a future that felt both terrifying and necessary. But Cheryl could sense the distance. She always could. One evening, as I stirred spaghetti sauce in the kitchen, she stormed in. Her arms were folded tight, her face pinched. "We need to talk," she snapped, her voice like the crack of a whip. I set down the spoon, bracing myself. "What now?" "You're not pulling your weight, Alyssa," she said, each word sharpened like glass. "I asked you to step up. Instead, you're still wasting time at that coffee shop, chasing your little hobby classes." The word hobby again, it cut deeper than she knew. "My classes aren't a hobby," I replied, heat rising in my chest. "They're my future. I'm already cooking, cleaning, driving the kids every day, keeping this whole house running. Isn't that enough?" Cheryl's laugh was bitter, hollow. "Future? You're living under my roof, eating my food. You think you're too good for us now." I wanted to shout back, to let the fury I'd bottled explode, but movement in the corner caught my eye. Ellie was standing in the doorway, clutching her homework folder, her eyes wide with fear. She was listening. She was learning, and I couldn't teach her that rage was the only language left, so I steadied myself. "I'm not your servant, Cheryl. I've given you 3 years of my life." Her jaw tightened, her voice dropping low. "If you're not all in, maybe you shouldn't be here at all." The words hung between us, heavy and final. Not an argument, not a plea, a threat. Blake leaned against the doorway, smirking like he'd been waiting for the scene all night. His silence was as loud as Cheryl's venom. Something inside me hardened. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was finished. Later that night, after the kids were tucked in and the house sank into uneasy quiet, I slipped into the backyard with my phone. I called Tara, my voice low, urgent. "She called me irresponsible," I whispered. "She thinks I owe her everything." On the other end, Tara's voice was calm but firm. "Lies, boundaries aren't selfish. They're survival. You're not her employee. You're not her mom. You deserve your own space, your own goals." "But the kids," my voice cracked. "They need their mother," Tara interrupted. "Not you burning yourself out. If you keep this up, you'll teach them that love means erasing yourself. That's not the lesson they need." Her words lit a fire in me. For years, I had equated love with sacrifice. But now I saw it differently. True love is honest. True love has limits. That night, I opened my laptop and stared at the apartment listings again. My savings were enough for a deposit, enough to step out even if it meant scraping by. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe I could do it. I closed my eyes and whispered a promise into the dark. I will not vanish. Not for Cheryl. Not for anyone. Leaving began in whispers, not declarations. I didn't announce anything to Cheryl, not yet. Instead, I started preparing in quiet, deliberate steps. I began with Logan. One evening, after the younger kids were asleep and the house was finally still, I pulled him aside. I handed him a small notebook. "You're 15 now," I told him gently. "There are things you need to know how to do." He frowned, suspicion flickering across his face. "Why?" "Because one day," I said carefully, You'll need to look after your brother and sisters even when I'm not right here." His jaw tightened. "You're leaving us because of Mom, aren't you?" I swallowed hard. "I'm not leaving you. I'm teaching you. There's a difference." So I began. I showed him how to make a grocery list, how to stretch meals with simple recipes like tacos and spaghetti. I taught him how to measure detergent, load the washer, check the dryer lint trap. He grumbled, rolled his eyes, muttered, "Mom never does this." But I saw him watching, absorbing, carrying the knowledge like a reluctant heir. Ellie overheard one of our lessons and confronted me later in the hallway. Her eyes were wide, her voice small. "Are you moving out because we're too much?" The question nearly broke me. I knelt down, pulling her into my arms. "No, Ellie, not because of you, never because of you. I just need my own space. That doesn't mean I won't be here for you." Her tears soaked into my shirt, and I held her long after she stopped crying. Children don't always understand the difference between leaving a house and leaving them. I prayed she would learn. Explaining it to Hunter and Nora was harder still. At breakfast, I tried. "I might live somewhere else soon," I said gently. Hunter frowned into his cereal, spoon hovering. "But who's going to help me with my science project?" he asked. Nora's lip trembled. "Will you still braid my hair?" I forced a smile even as my throat closed. "Of course, I'll still help. I'll still braid. I'll still be here, just in another place." Their puzzled faces haunted me all day. Meanwhile, I began sneaking out to tour apartments after dropping the kids at school. The first place was small, a single room with a kitchenette and a window that looked out onto a cracked parking lot. The landlord rattled off numbers, $1,500 a month plus deposit. My palms sweated, but I nodded anyway, clutching my notebook like a lifeline. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Back at Cheryl's, I kept my plans hidden. I still packed lunches, still mediated arguments, still braided hair. On the outside, I was the same, but inside, a countdown had begun. At night, I sketched again, real designs this time, bold and confident. Each line reminded me I was still here, still capable of creating something that was mine. And every time I closed that sketchbook, I whispered the same vow to myself. Leaving isn't betrayal, it's survival. Soon, very soon, I would walk out that door. The day the storm finally broke, it didn't arrive as a scream. It arrived as an accusation. I had just finished helping Ellie with her history homework when Cheryl stormed into the kitchen, her arms crossed, her face dark with anger. Blake followed, leaning against the counter with that smug half-smile that made my skin crawl. "You're not pulling your weight, Alyssa," Cheryl snapped. "I asked you to step up and you're still wasting time with that coffee shop job. You're irresponsible." The word cut deeper than she could imagine. I felt my chest tighten, my hands tremble. Irresponsible. For 3 years, I had carried her household like it was my own. I had poured every ounce of my energy, my savings, my youth into raising her children while she and Blake drifted in and out like ghosts. "I'm doing everything I can," I said, my voice rising. "I cook, I clean, I drive the kids. I keep this place standing while you—" Cheryl cut me off with a bitter laugh. "That's not enough. With the baby coming, we need you here, not chasing some hobby degree." I stood, my chair scraping across the tile. My voice shook, but it carried steel. "My design classes aren't a hobby, they're my future." Her laugh turned into a sneer. "Future? You're living in my house, eating my food. You think you're too good for us now." Behind her, Blake finally chimed in, his tone casual but sharp as a blade. "She's right, you owe us. You wouldn't even have a roof over your head without Cheryl." Before I could fire back, I noticed Ellie standing in the hallway, her small frame tense, her eyes wide and wet. She was listening. She was learning, and I knew whatever I said now would live in her memory, so I steadied my voice. "I'm not your servant, Cheryl. I've given you 3 years of my life. That ends now." Her face hardened, her voice dropping to a hiss. "If you're not all in, maybe you shouldn't be here at all." The words struck like a hammer. She wasn't asking anymore, she was threatening. That night after the kids had gone to bed and the house fell into uneasy silence, I slipped outside and called Tara. My voice shook as I spoke into the dark. She called me irresponsible. She says I owe her my life. Tara's reply was steady, a lifeline in the storm. Alyssa, listen to me. You need to set boundaries. You are not her maid. You are not her mom. You deserve your own space. If you stay, you'll vanish, and they'll keep letting you. Her words struck something inside me, something I had buried under years of duty and guilt. For too long, I had believed that love meant sacrifice. But now I saw the truth. Love without boundaries is just captivity. The next morning, I opened my laptop. My fingers trembled as I typed in searches for apartments again. Studios, one-bedrooms, small spaces with peeling paint, but spaces that were mine. I ran the numbers until my vision blurred. My $3,000 in savings could cover the deposit and first month's rent. My coffee shop shifts, plus maybe a few extra freelance design gigs, could just barely keep me afloat. It would be tight. It would be terrifying, but it would be mine. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Hope. Hope, once awakened, is difficult to silence. It follows you like a shadow, even through the darkest corridors. But so does fear. The days that followed were taut with tension. Cheryl's eyes narrowed at me more often, as if she sensed the ground shifting beneath her feet. Blake's smirk carried an edge of mockery, like he already knew a battle was brewing and he couldn't wait to watch. The kids felt it too. Logan grew quieter, his sarcasm dimmed. Ellie hovered close, offering to help more than usual. Hunter asked questions he didn't understand the weight of. Why is everyone mad? While Nora clung to me with a desperation that nearly broke my resolve, I told myself to endure a little longer, just until the lease was signed, just until the keys were in my hand. But Cheryl wasn't willing to let me drift away quietly. It happened on a Thursday. The air outside carried the faint chill of early autumn, and the house smelled of overcooked spaghetti. I was rinsing dishes when Cheryl burst into the kitchen, her voice sharp enough to rattle the plates. "You think you're smart, Alyssa, planning to sneak out, planning to leave us high and dry." I turned, dish towel in hand. "I'm planning to live my life." Her face twisted, eyes flashing. "You're not going anywhere, you owe us, after everything we've done for you." The injustice of it slammed into me. "Everything you've done for me. Cheryl, I've been raising your kids for 3 years. I've poured my savings into their clothes, their medicine, their school. I've given up my 20s to keep this house from falling apart, and you call me irresponsible." Her hands shook, but her voice was steady, cruel. "If you walk out, don't bother coming back, you'll be dead to us. Dead to us." The phrase landed like a curse. For a moment, the kitchen seemed to tilt. I caught sight of Logan standing in the hallway, fists clenched, his jaw tight. Ellie behind him, her eyes brimming with tears. I couldn't let them see me break. So I straightened, folded the towel, and placed it neatly on the counter. If that's how you see me, then so be it. I left the kitchen, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. That night I called Tara, pacing the small strip of backyard under a cold moon. My voice was raw. She said I'll be dead to them if I leave. Tara didn't hesitate. "Then let yourself be reborn somewhere else." Her words, simple and steady, settled into me. It wasn't just about leaving a house. It was about choosing life over slow erasure. Later, as I sat at my desk, I opened my sketchbook. My hand moved with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I drew not just lines, but shapes of possibility, a logo, a symbol, a reminder of who I was before duty buried me. Each stroke whispered a promise, soon. The decision was no longer fragile. It was firm. I would leave. And when I did, it would not be in shame. It would be in strength. The week of my departure unfolded like a held breath. Every hour in Cheryl's house felt heavier, as if the walls themselves were aware of what I was about to do. I moved carefully, packing a few clothes into an old duffel, hiding my sketchbooks under sweaters. saving digital copies of my design projects on a flash drive. Outwardly, nothing changed. I still drove the carpool, still folded laundry, still braided Nora's hair, but inside, the countdown had begun. I signed the lease on a small studio in Madison. The landlord slid the keys across his desk, and the sound of metal against wood felt like a gavel striking. My heart raced, half terror, half relief. For the first time in years, I owned something that wasn't tied to Cheryl, a door that opened into a space that was only mine. That evening, I told Logan first. I pulled him aside after dinner, handing him a small notebook where I'd written grocery lists, chore schedules, even reminders for Nora's inhaler. "I'm moving out," I said quietly. His face hardened, but not in surprise. He had known. "Because of Mom," he muttered. "Because of me," I corrected. "I need to live my life, but I'll still be here for you, just differently." He didn't speak for a long moment, then finally a small nod. His eyes said what his words didn't. He understood more than he wanted to. Ellie overheard, of course. She cornered me later, her voice trembling. "It's because of us, isn't it? We're too much." The words split me open. I knelt, pulling her into my arms. "No, Ellie, it's not because of you. I love you, but love doesn't mean giving up who you are. It means showing up in ways that last. This is how I last." She cried into my shoulder until my shirt was damp, and I held her until sleep carried her off. Hunter and Nora were trickier. One morning at breakfast, I tried again. "I'll have a new place soon," I said gently. "But I'll visit. I'll help, I promise." Hunter's brow furrowed. "Who's gonna help me with my science project?" Nora's lip quivered. "Will you still braid my hair?" "Yes," I whispered, brushing her cheek. "Always." Their confusion clung to me the rest of the day. Meanwhile, Cheryl grew suspicious. She caught me scrolling through apartment listings once and snapped. "Planning to bail on us? Typical." Her tone dripped with contempt. I didn't answer. I didn't owe her answers anymore. By the weekend, my decision was sealed. I moved my few belongings, duffel bags, sketchbooks, laptop, into the studio. It was small, almost bare. Just a mattress on the floor, a desk against the wall, one window looking out over a tired street. But it was mine. I placed my sketchbook on the desk, opened it to a blank page, and for the first time in years, I breathed without permission. 3 days later, the past tried to reclaim me. My phone rang with an unfamiliar number. When I answered, a steady voice introduced himself. "This is Officer Doyle from the Madison Police Department. We've received a complaint. Can you meet us at your sister's address?" My stomach dropped. I drove back, my mind racing, heart pounding. When I arrived, 2 officers stood on the porch. Cheryl was there too, her face flushed with rage, finger jabbing toward me. "She stole $500 and trashed our stuff," she shouted. The officers turned to me. "Is that true?" one asked. Shock surged through me. "No, I moved out clean. I haven't touched their things." Cheryl dragged them inside, pointing to a sofa with a torn cushion and a washing machine that wouldn't start. "She did this before she left." I shook my head. "I didn't touch any of it." The officers examined the damage. One noted the stains beneath the tier on the sofa looked old. The other found a loose wire in the washer. "Could be wear and tear," he said. "Check my car, check my apartment," I insisted. "You'll find nothing." Before Cheryl could argue, Logan stepped forward. His voice was steady, defiant. "She's lying. That sofa's been ripped since last summer. Hunter spilled juice on it. The washer broke weeks ago because Mom overloaded it. And the money, she spent it on groceries." Cheryl's face went pale. "Logan, enough," she hissed, but her voice trembled. The officers exchanged glances. "So no theft, no vandalism," one said flatly. "Ma'am, false reports are a problem. Don't call us unless it's real." They left. Cheryl stood frozen, rage simmering. I turned to Logan, my throat tight. "You didn't have to do that," I whispered. He shrugged, my eyes down. "You don't deserve this. You've always been there for us." I hugged him, tears burning. For a moment, the burden of 3 years felt lighter. Later, back in my studio, I sat at my desk. My hands shook as I sketched, but steadied with each line. Cheryl could try to destroy me, but I had crossed the threshold. I wasn't going back. This time, the life I built would be mine. 3 days of quiet passed after the police incident, though quiet is never truly quiet when Cheryl is in the background. I knew her silence wasn't peace, it was the sharpening of knives. Yet in my little studio, I felt something new. Ownership of my breath, the soft hum of a space that answered only to me. For the first time in years, I woke to an alarm that belonged only to me, not to 4 children scrambling for Pop-Tarts or to a sister who treated my life like hers to command. But the reprieve did not last. One evening, as I sipped coffee at my desk, Logan's name lit up my phone. His voice cracked through the receiver. "Mom's in the hospital," he said, words rushing. Something about the pregnancy. The kids are freaking out. My mug froze halfway to my lips. Despite everything, the accusations, the betrayal, my mind flashed not to Cheryl but to Ellie's shy smile, Hunter's questions, Nora's braids, Logan's clenched fists. They didn't deserve this chaos. I drove to the hospital, my heart hammering. A doctor, calm and efficient, explained the situation. "Your sister has placenta previa. She'll need bed rest, possibly until delivery. 3 months, that's what she said, 3 months of forced stillness." I stepped into Cheryl's room. She was pale, her fire dimmed, her eyes darting away from mine. "The kids need you," she whispered, voice fragile in a way I'd never heard. Everything in me screamed to walk away to protect the fragile freedom I'd clawed back. But Logan's shaky voice echoed in my head. I couldn't abandon them, not the children who had leaned on me, not after everything. "I'll help," I said at last. My tone was firm, sharper than she expected. "But only for the kids and on my terms." Cheryl blinked, startled. "What terms?" "I keep my job, I keep my apartment, I don't pay you a dime. I'll step in for 3 months, no more." She frowned, but exhaustion dulled her protest. She nodded, too tired to argue. Back at the house, the storm was waiting. Dishes piled high, laundry spilling into hallways, homework scattered like confetti. The kids were on edge. Ellie clung to me, whispering, "Is Mom okay?" Hunter asked why Blake wasn't home, and Nora refused to sleep unless I was near. Logan tried to play the man of the house, but his clenched fists betrayed his fear. Blake, meanwhile, was a ghost. His shifts at the supermarket stretched longer, or so he said. When he did appear, he slipped through the house like smoke, grabbing a beer and disappearing into the garage. "He's been like this since Mom got sick," Logan muttered one night, his voice flat with disgust. So I took charge, but not like before. This time, I carved boundaries into every corner. Logan and Ellie split chores, dishes for her, laundry for him. Hunter and Nora got smaller tasks, tidying their rooms, setting the table. I drove over after my shifts, cooked dinner, checked homework, and left, always left. Back to my apartment, my space, my anchor. One night, Ellie looked up at me from her pillow, her eyes soft. "Why can't you stay?" I knelt beside her, brushing hair from her forehead. "Because I need my own place, but I'll always be here for you." She nodded slowly, though her eyes held sadness. Tara called often, her voice steady. "You're doing too much again," she warned. "Don't let them pull you under." "I know," I sighed. "It's just 3 months. I've got boundaries this time." But still, I felt the weight pressing in. Blake's absence, Cheryl's silence from her hospital bed, the kids' growing fear, it all bent toward me. And I had to remind myself nightly, this time I was helping without erasing. This time, I would not vanish. 3 months, that was the limit. I repeated it like prayer, hoping the words would hold when the storm inevitably came again. 3 months passed like a blur of dishes, homework, late-night drives, and whispered reassurances. Cheryl returned home with her newborn son, fragile from bed rest but alive, and for that I was grateful, yet gratitude did not erase truth. I had done what I promised. I kept the children fed, safe, and steady while their world shook. I showed Logan how to take responsibility without losing himself, reminded Ellie that love isn't measured by sacrifice, encouraged Hunter's endless curiosity, and kept Nora's little hands braided and warm. Then, when the time came, I stepped back. The final day was quiet. I met Cheryl in the kitchen, sunlight stretching across the counter. I told her calmly, "I love the kids, but I can't be part of this anymore. You're their mother. It's time for you to step up." She didn't argue, just turned away, her silence a wall. I left the house carrying nothing but a small bag and the certainty that I had given all I could. The children clung to me, each in their own way. Logan with a nod that held more weight than words, Ellie with a sketch she'd drawn of us side by side, Hunter chattering about a science fair, Nora begging for one last braid. I promised them I would never vanish, that my love was not bound by walls or distance. Back in my little studio, I looked at the walls that had once felt bare and now felt full, with sketches, with designs, with the quiet hum of my own becoming. I wasn't rich, I wasn't free from fear, but I was finally me. For the first time in years, I felt whole. Family is love, yes, but love without boundaries is not family. It is erasure. And I had learned that sometimes the bravest way to love is to stand tall, to keep your own flame alive, so that those who look to you for light know it's possible to survive the dark. Dear friends, thank you for watching and listening to this story. Your presence here means more than you know. I hope Alyssa's journey reminds you that love is powerful, but so is self-respect. I wish you health, peace, and the warmth of a family that cherishes you without asking you to disappear. Take care of yourself and take care of each other. Until the next story, stay safe, stay kind, and may happiness find its way to your home.